recording so far? If you all can start. Okay,
Yeah,
so
started now.
yeah, good. So if you look at, if you remember from our last session, we only read the load balancer. Load balancer is nothing but is an application which is a layer 7, right? Wrong. Layer 7 load balancer. Sorry, my bad. Please stop me. Load balancer, and load balancer was on a network layer. Okay, network plain load balancer, and this load balancer is an application gateway. This is on layer 7, which is an application layer. Okay, so there is one difference, that is in a layer 4, this is in a layer 7 application load balancer. Now it can do path based routing. Path based routing means might be for some request you request for the images, some request you request for the videos. And if I do say typically, okay, let me, okay, so if I say www something here and I say icons, okay, what it says, now you need images, right? Wrong. If you need only images, then it will send the request to the image where the images are there, right? If you look at books, it will send a request only where the books are stored. If you look at for the news, right, what it means now, means based on your requirement, the past based routing, it will send the traffic, right? Wrong. Are you getting me? Hello.
Yes, Gurudev.
Okay. And now if you have any other, means you, ideally these are the multiple things in the real environment. Okay, multiple things. So we can distribute our traffic based on our path. Okay, means when I say where www html/images, means it will go into the images, and if where www html/videos, it will go into the videos. Rest, the prefix before the image remains the default root directory of your web. Okay, now another is a multiple site routing, path based routing and multiple site routing. Again, it comes with application gateway, which is WAF and the load balancer. Okay, WAF plus load balancer. Now in my site itself, I can route this traffic to two different domain. If you look at, right, contoso.com and the fabricum.com. Now this is a pool of servers for the contoso.com pool, and this is a fabricum.com pool, right? Wrong. So it is path based routing and the multiple site routing. The difference, if you identify, in path based you will have typical path, right? It could be absolute path, and there is one more path I'm not remembering, absolute path and two things always called. Okay, so this is with the path, and if you see the with the site, this is a multiple site routing. Okay, this is an app. Now again, we have seen the front end IP in our normal load balancer. We have seen the listener. We have seen the rules there, routing rules, and we have seen the backend pool. We have seen the health probes. Okay, we have not seen the web application firewall, WAF. And trust me, guys, this is a very important feature. But again, this becomes an optional whether you want to use it or you do not want to use it. Okay, if I look at this simple pictorial or analogy how it works in, now this front end IP is defines the VIP or an internal load balancer, virtual IP or ILB, internal load balancer front end IP. It sends a traffic to the listener, which is in a front end listener on a port and IP, and cert if it is running on a HTTPS secure port. Okay, now listener will have either certificates or the ports. Okay, for SSL offloading, it will be routed the traffic based on the rule, whether it's in a path based routing or multiple site routing. It will define. Based on the request, it will send based on the settings in the HTTPS health check, what my backend pools are there, what are my custom probes are there, and it will simply send a traffic to it. If you look at here, this was a load balancer we discussed in last session. If I say app, okay, app gateway, I'm having an application gateway. Okay, if I say create application gateway or I say create, means the same only. Okay, there is no difference. Now, as usual in every resource in Azure, it will ask you the subscription, the billing unit, and the O2RG I'm taking. Okay, so for some practice, I was doing some test for the automatic shutdown and the restart of the VM. So this is for this, and there are certain resources. I will use AutoRG, and I say my app gateway. Okay, where you want to create it, look at where you want to create it. You need to define the reason where you want to create this particular resource. I say East US. Now it says the tier, means you want to standard or standard v2, means v2 is an advanced version of standard. Similarly, WEF is an advanced version of WEF2 is an advanced version of WEF. Now you want to use simple application gateway or you want to use with WEF. Okay, we need to tell it here. Okay, if you select this, then only the standard feature will be available. You can read it, the description with the circle, hovering your mouse over the circle. Okay, the V2 tier offers performance enhancements and support for some critical new features. Choose a web tier to support web application firewall. On this application gateway, you can upgrade to a web tier after the application gateway has been created. This means the upgraded. If I have created a standard and I want to upgrade, I can upgrade to standard V2 or with WEF. Is that clear, guys? WEF is a paid feature, please remember. Now, instance count means this instance count. This instance count. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Now I say to CQ, SKU means stock keeping unit, means you want to use small, medium, large. I say small. HTTP2 is disabled. We can enable it. Now we need to associate with the virtual network, and I say my virtual network is my AutoRG VNet. Okay, in which subnet? Now if you look at, I am having subnet and only one subnet is available here, and it says the subnet must only have application gateway. So there are certain resources where that only do exist in that particular subnet. Okay, now as this subnet, this default subnet is already having other resources, so I need to create one more subnet, and I say my subnet, gateway subnet. You create a gateway subnet, it will take the new IP, is a net gateway, or for any other purpose we can define accordingly. Okay, this is simple, like in a subnet creation. Let me take another tab. Okay, now if you look at here now, gateway subnet. Okay, now this gateway subnet is again used for gateway. Okay, gateway, this is not an application gateway, this is a gateway subnet, is for other firewall. Okay, now why say I created and it's not? Because this is in a different subnet. Now I will create one more, okay, and that will be used for my this application gateway subnet. Okay, I say subnet and I say app subnet and I say save it. Now we'll go back once again, default. Now I'm having a, if you look at the app subnet available for my this application gateway. So always do remember there are certain requirement for the dedicated subnet, and this will go for the gateway subnet. Okay. Now if I want to implement a firewall, then I must have a dedicated subnet for my firewall as well. Okay. Otherwise it will not allow. So you might have seen this is a new feature. Okay. Now front ends. What the front end is going to happen? So I say public. Okay. Now I can select my IP address or I can add in a new IP. Okay. Now if you look at, by default it creates with the basic and dynamic. Basic is a secure and assignment is a dynamic, but later on we can change it, or we can create exclusively this public IP and add it from this drop down list. Okay, if you look at this, we can add it from here. Okay, now this is for public. If it is in a private, use a specific private IP address. No, means it will take the IP address available in that particular subnet. Means I need both. So it will have both public IP as well as a private IP. Okay, both public as well as a private, because it has to take a request from the front end from the public, need to send for the backend, means both. Next, backend. Now I need to add in a backend. If you remember earlier load balancer, we added a backend pool, same backend pool, add a backend pool. My app gateway backend pool. Add backend pool without targets. I can do so. But I say no, and I say here, if you look at IP address or FQDN, fully qualified domain name, virtual machines, VMSS or app services. Okay. I say virtual machine. Now I can pick my virtual machine from here. I say my virtual machine. I can pick my virtual machine from here. Okay. Now, if my target is not a virtual machine, my target is IP address. What I say? 10.0.0.5. I say this is not my target. My target is an IP address. What I say? 10.0.0.4. Right? Now, virtual machine or an IP address? No, my target is a VM skill set, which we do not have. Okay. So if we have a virtual machine skill set, we can add it here. Or if I am having my app service created, now your app service should be available here if you have any application services. Is that clear? So all four options. I say add it. So there are two targets. There are two targets, 10.0.0.4, 10.0.0.5. Next configuration. Now add a front end IP. You know front end IP? Public IP. This is for the public IP. This is privately for the dynamic, which is my edit from my subnet. Now If I want front-end IP public private, now I can use it here. What IP? Public. Now I can use it from here. Okay. Private IP can be assigned here. Now add a routing rule. How your routing should work. Now, what is a listener name is? What is front-end IP? What is a port is? What is a listener type? Basic or multi-site? Or error page URL? You want to get it? Yes or no? If yes, say what you need a better gateway. If I say I'm not available with any valid URL, okay, that URL address will show this bad request. Okay, this should be typically an URL in HTTPS format. Okay, now forbidden, we can put another URL, means it can direct to another site which could be a available site or simple is an 403 error. So based on our requirement, we do not have any such option available in my current lab, okay, to reroute the traffic or reroute to bad request to any valid DNS, the HTTPS request. So I will select no and I say add. I give it. Okay. Now HTTPS settings name. This HTTPS settings means app HTTP. Enable. Again, port 80, I am using it. If we have secured, we need to use 443. We do not have any certificate, we will use port 80. Now, cookies based affinity and connection draining. Cookies based means the application gateway can use cookies to keep a user session on the same server. Okay. If you remember in our simple load balancer for session affinity, we were using none. Okay. IP address and IP address with protocol. The same comes with here, the cookies based affinity. It's nothing but a session affinity in app gateway. Now, connection draining means the connection draining has grace for remove of backend members, means my VMs skill sets, okay, or my the IP address which I have added on my previous screen, which were 10.0.0.1.4 and 0.5. When this feature is enabled, the deregistering instance of a backend pool will not receive any request. Means if the connection is established to my backend VM IP address, okay, or skill set or a FQDN, and at any point of time that instance becomes unhealthy, so it goes through a deregistration process to that particular group. This applies to backend instances that are explicitly removed from the backend pool via an API call, as well as instance reported unhealthy by health group. Once it start reporting unhealthy, means my this app gateway will not route any traffic to that particular target during deregistration process. I say disable. Request timeout in seconds. The request timeout is the number of seconds that the application gateway will wait to receive a response from the backend pool before it returns a connection timeout error message. Ideally, we can increase also this value, decrease also this value, but ideally keep it 30 seconds or 1 minute. Reason being, if you fail so frequently with 20 or 10 seconds, by the time other resource will come or other resource will come into the service which was previously unhealthy, even that is going to take that much time. So it should be an ideal figure based on the load, connection request, or the application performance. Now override backend path. Again, path, you need to define the text for based on the path based routing. Okay, now which you have it, whatever my default domain is there, www.abc.com slash I say images. So not taking a fully qualified for that absolute path. So if I say images, it will go to the images. If I say videos, it will go to the videos. Okay, we can define, and it will take my documents, or it will says my repository. Okay, so we can define based this path should do exist. Okay, it is not going to create, this is kind of an source already exist, so this should be available. Say add. Now with this was for the listener, this is for the backend target, this is for the backend target. Say add. Now my backend target is being added. Now add a backend pool. This is my backend pool. I added in the same screen. If you look at the routing rules and a backend pool, and say the next tags, and say next review and a create. If any error will be reported at this stage. So validation has passed. Now say and a create. Very similar like a load balancer. Any difference? Guys, am I audible?
Yeah.
So if now if I ask you, can you please name 2-3 differences between load balancer and the application gateway? Come on, anything. Anyone?
Load balancer will work on VNet level.
Hmm.
And application gateway is working on application layer.
No, then you say network layer and the application layer.
Yes.
Right? So VNet is a different, okay, that becomes an as per OSI model, the network layer. Correct. Another. Another difference. This is having a the basic load balancer. The load balancer is not having a firewall enabled, and application gateway is having a inbuilt firewall capability, right? Remember web application WAF, right? Noticed? In WAF, we can control the traffic in multiple ways. We can control the traffic in multiple ways. So that becomes your WAF. Okay. Let it complete. So what is next is a lab, module lab and review. Now implement a traffic management. Okay, traffic manager. Now you are asked with implementing a hub spoke topology for network traffic. The topology should include an Azure load balancer and Azure application gateway. Now I believe if I ask you, can you tell me how I can run something like now this अरे किसम में sorry guys. Okay, so if I ask you one thing, okay, my resources are there in my this VNet only my VNet. Okay, I want to do a simple load balance. What you will do? LB, simple load balancer, which we read in the last session. Right? Wrong?
So for single VNet, do we use a load balancer, or for multiple VNet we will use?
Load balancer is for the single VNet. See, it will be associated with the single network. Okay.
VNet.
Now, if someone asks you, can you please let me know if I want to use the load balancer with inclusion of the firewall? What you will say? The app gateway. Okay. Got my point? Now, this application gateway again can be with this in on-prem. It could be in cloud. But do remember, this could be an FQDN name. It could be a VM name, IP address. Okay, skill set. Now, let's say I have a requirement. Now, either this load balancer or this app gateway cannot communicate to two different providers. When I say the two different provider, here is my AWS. There is one EC2 instance here. Okay. Similar like I have a VM here. And trust me, for the fault tolerance, okay, even at the service provider level, if my some service goes down in Azure, the service should run in my AWS. Got my point? Now, what solution will use it? Trust me, there is no such solution in load balancer or application gateway. The third things comes as a traffic manager. Traffic manager. Okay. Now this works only on DNS. Please remember DNS. Let's say this site is there on abc.com. Now I will say this is my site. Okay, so I say MST my site 1. Okay, dot abc.com. This name will get resolved from Azure and here I say mst2.abc.com. Now this will get resolved from AWS. Okay. Now If I'm having a this traffic manager enabled or created this solution into my environment or for my customer, now this will be getting connected to my Azure and this will be getting connected to my AWS. And any point of time, this site goes down. Now this will be working. Okay, and this called also a global load balancer globally. This feature is not available in load balancer. This is internal and a public, but not the global. This is again limited with the same, but this is truly a global. Is that clear, guys?
So DNS server will be available on both provider,
Yes,
right?
yes,
On
yes,
AWS as well as on.
yes. So by default, DNS is getting resolved from your 0.2 IP address, right? Which is reserved for each VNet, right? Wrong or subnet. This is default DNS. But if I'm using this site, trust me, there will be my custom DNS like we use in our organizations. Getting me? And that will work for the resolution of these names. Okay, make sense? So implement traffic management scenario. You are asked with implementing a hub spoke topology. For a network traffic, the topology should include an Azure load balancer and an Azure application gateway. Now, provision the lab environment, configure the hub and spoke network topology, test transitive of the virtual network peering, configure routing of the hub and spoke, implementing Azure load balancer, implementing Azure application gateway. Okay, this for entire traffic management. So this will come traffic manager will come in another section, but this I am just giving you for the third load balancer traffic manager. Okay, so LB app gateway and the TM traffic manager. Okay, so remember these are the three load balancer in Azure. Now just we saw the term hub and spoke model. What hub is there? Hope you remember the term we use or we have heard it hub in our network part, right? Wrong. And if you ask me somewhere 90s or the 2000s, hub topology was much in use. Later on, it got replaced with switch, and the same is got switched now with the router. Okay, in hub and spoke model, what happens now? Currently, I'm playing a role of hub as a trainer, and you all three or four are becoming a model of Spark. Now, if you have any question, who need to answer your question? I need to answer your question, right? So 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now I becomes on a hub or now is or as a central person, right? Or a common person. Now, if any network or any communication should go via this to this, it will come via this. If any communication should happen vice versa, hub will come into the picture. Similarly for this. Okay, similarly for this. And now if this want to communicate and similarly vice versa for this and this. Okay, So now I will come to this part. Okay, so this becomes an hub and spoke model. Now, if you look at in hub and spoke model, I'm having in task 1, task 2, task 3. This is how we really create our lab. How we really create a lab. But going with the different nets, okay, VNet, okay, this is one VNet, okay, where this is one VNet, okay. Now this is another, and this is another. Now we are having a local peering. We are having a local peering. It's a standard way of communication between two different network. Very simple. But these two different network is nothing but is a VNet in Azure. VNet in Azure. Now, based on this, this can communicate. Okay, this can communicate. Now, for this VNet, if you look at, I'm having a subnet 0, I'm having a subnet 1. Okay, now there is a one VM in subnet 0, another VNet in subnet 1. But for this, I'm having a dedicated subnet. And if you remember, for app gateway, we created a dedicated subnet. We created a dedicated subnet. And this dedicated subnet will get communicated this app gateway to this particular subnet. This is a route table of this particular VNet 62. Okay, this will get to this subnet and 63 to this particular VNet 3. So VNet 1, VNet 2, VNet 3. Okay, this is a part of this. Now for this application, this subnet gateway, this will be my internal way of forwarding the traffic via this particular gateway. So similarly, now if you need to ask some question, I need to answer. If he need to ask some question, and if he needs to ask the question, I becomes a central or as a hub, and this all becomes an Spark 1, Spark 2, and Spark 3. Simple thing. There is nothing to make it complicated. Now you follow same process, create a same lab, ping anything from anywhere, it will ping. Okay, and as for this, we have the routes enabled. The routes enabled. Okay, routes enabled we have for this, and this is nothing but is in a user defined route. If you remember, we read it custom route and the UDR user defined routes, then it becomes, sorry, custom or a user defined, and the system default route, this is my UDRs, and you can route the traffic, okay, to anywhere.
So UDR is simply software or any hardware router like
It's a
whatever.
API.
API, simple API. Okay.
Simple API. We simply go ahead. And if you look at, right, so whatever we are doing here is nothing but the API is in a background, right? Wrong. Now, if I take example, everyone is aware about this, right? Wrong. We say rman configure set current control file to 1, right? Wrong. This complete command to run, right? Wrong. And this is having a meaning. If I write select star from EMP from my this image, will it fetch some record? It will not, right? Wrong. Because this is not associated with any respective API, right? Wrong. This is simple my text. But if same I write on my SQL prompt, right? Wrong. It gives you some output, right? Wrong. So it's nothing but is an API. API you provide some inputs. Input is nothing but is a custom routes, and it will update it. Okay, na base table. Whenever something is needed, it will check from the base table. Like we have a read only dictionary views, right? Wrong. Getting me? We say connect, but authentication happens, right? Based on this, we provide SysDBA, right? How? It do read some values from here, right? Dictionary views, whether that is authorized or not. How that is authorized? Now, if I've created a one user ABC and I provided him DBA privilege, that is available here, right? Now, that is, this is a part one, this is part two. So all happens using API, or we can say is a backend calls, right? In typically cloud, we always call as an APIs. Is that clear? Is
Yes, sir.
we have seen how to create a peering. We have seen how to create a custom routes or user defined routes. We have seen how to create a dedicated subnet, and typically you follow this, you will achieve it. Okay, and this is nothing but is a review of it. Manage a traffic flow in your Azure deployment with routes, user defined, improve application scalability and resiliency by using Azure load balancer. In also you can have like a application gateway, and in application also standard one and standard two, and also web enable load balancer your web app traffic with the application gateway. Now I should have my application gateway created. Now if you look at this is in my application gateway, okay, and one field for just a minute, policy. Okay, so policy is failed, rest all is deployed. Now, if you look at here, this becomes my application gateway. Okay. Now, for this, let me take this my app gateway. Okay. Now, this becomes my app gateway, and front end public IP address is this is my front end public IP address. Now, in this, I have to go with the configurations. If you look at this is a standard. Now, if you want to change, you can change to WAF. Okay. Now you have a SKU as an small, you can change it based on the requirement. Now currently HTTP2 is disabled, you can enable. Okay, sorry, disabled, and you can make enable vice versa. Web application firewall rule. This is very important. Okay, and this will be only available if you have web enabled. Okay, now firewall status, it is showing disabled. I say configuration, and in configuration I say my standard and I say my web. Now it is asking you size, I say medium, because app gateway in web is not available in small size, it is available only in medium and large, whereas a normal app gateway without web is available in small, medium and large. Okay, do a save of it. Any change modification, this is nothing but an update, right? But basically in background API is calling an update statement only, right? Now web application firewall, now if you look at the web application status is showing disabled. Okay, so now firewall status is now enabled. Okay, now firewall mode, you want a detection mode or prevention mode? We always know for any problem there is a prevent action and there is a detection action. Okay, detection means it will detect. Prevent means it will detect and it will prevent, will take appropriate action. Example is, means if I am having a preventive and I'm having a detective, what it will do? Detective means it will only detect whether some error is there or not. Preventive means if some error is coming up to a certain limit, it will try to fix off that error as well, based on the automation is being inbuilt into the solution. Now, exclusion. My app gateway will evaluate everything in the request except for the following items included in the list. Simple example is, in my app, in my app, I want to block anything that is ideally not the functional or functionality of a web application, because my application should be available, right? If I block for everyone, that doesn't make a sense to me. Got my point? Blocking here means I say for a particular device, and this is my device is firewall.abc.com is my device. Okay, try to understand. Now I say to this device, block everyone or everything and allow only admin IP. Admin IP, or allow for certain things CEO of my company. That's it. That becomes a truly rule of here. Blocking everything and allowing someone. This could be, I'm allowing only the IP address 10.2.3.20 to allow. Rest I'm denying it. That becomes a qualifying rule of it. Okay. Now that I can add it in an exclusion policy. Now global parameters: inspect request body, max request body size, file upload limit, means the activity which I'm doing for my this web application, I'm keeping a default after enabling it. Now backend pools, if you look at, we have already configured the backend pool. If I go to the backend pool, if you remember, I have added an IP address. Now if you want, you can change to the VM as well. Okay, no matter. So you can play based on your requirement. I say save it. Fair enough. HTTPS settings we have done in our app gateway steps. Okay. Now cookies based affinity enabled. Application gateway affinity means based on your requirement, you can change the second settings. Front end IP configuration, again public configured, private configured. Okay, this is public one. Listeners we configured, this is my listener. And if you look at this particular cipher suits in my TLS version 1.0 for my this listener is available. Rules, this is my rule. Health probe, this is my no health probe for this, will add it. So if you look at in normal load balancer, there was only 4 options. There was only 4 options. Here many options, though the options except web application firewall remains all the same, means there in one settings we configured 2 things. Here all are separate. Now health probe is need to be done for what? My health probe is host. Host is what? VM1. What is HTTPS settings? Define the HTTPS settings. Use probe matching conditions. Yes, no. Needs to be. The value must not be empty. Bhudev. Okay, is Bhudev. We can add the health probe as well. Okay, so health probe is also added. So similarly, rest options remain user the first this, and the rest is a normal service for the alert matrix diagnostic. For the, this becomes an important piece of any resource. Okay. Now this is app gateway. API that might help for at least one resource deployment operation failed. Okay, so let me see my VM. Okay. VM is down. Okay, so obvious. VM is down. Now, as I did say, I have WEF enabled. I have WEF enabled, and if I go to here, anyway, this is up to today only, so no problem. We will run for 4 hours. Okay, up to the our today's session end. Okay, so I have sufficient money for today. Now this is an application gateway. Go ahead and create it, test it. Okay, will do as a load balancer only. If you are good with the load balancer, you should be good with the LB also. Okay, any question, guys? With this module or the module 5 or 6 is done. So if you want to keep the recording separate, or if you are keeping anything, you can use that. Okay, now very important, after IAM, network, VM, storage is another piece, typical piece of infrastructure as a service or the cloud service. Okay, without storage, nothing is going to happen. Now, what a storage account is, what is a blob storage is, why a storage security, what is an Azure file and file sync, what is a managing storage, module 7 lab and review. Now here only blob storage is there, whereas we have a storage of queue storage, table storage, and file storage. Once we create this storage account, storage account is nothing but is in a logical container now. This account is nothing but is a logical container. Please do not correlate this boundary now with the VNet. Okay, this is my storage account, and there are some standards for the storage account, the naming conventions, the naming text limit. Okay, reason again. So storage account means Azure storage services, storage account kinds, replication strategies, assessing storage, securing storage endpoints, demonstration securing or storage endpoint. Now, like a endpoint we were having for other things, now this becomes a storage endpoint as well. Now, this Azure storage is a service that you can use to store files, messages, tables, and other type of information. Okay, so when I say files, means the flat files. Okay, when I say the flat files, my doc, my Excel, my notepad, means those files, I can use those files, my images, my VHDs, that will go in your blob. Another is, second is store files, my shared files, my file share, it will go in your file storage. Now, when I say my messages, means my company, my service provider keep sending the messages like Airtel send, Idea send, AWS send, Azure send, any service provider. Those messages will be there in a queue storage. Those messages will be stored in a queue storage and is another kind of a storage. Third is a tables. I'm having some structured data. I'm having some structured data. When I say structured data means simple, you can take data of my EMP table. Data of my EMP table. Trust me, that data I cannot store in blob means flat file structure. I cannot store that data in file share. I cannot store that data into the queue table, queues. I can only store that data in the tables. Now, if an employee have EMP ID, EMP ID, and he's having a name, obviously, now it is having a role or his rank or his a position, and he's having a department. Trust me, this data I can load into the notepad, Word doc, Excel, but that will not make a sense for me if I'm having a 10,000 of employees and I need a details of specific employee. Okay, is very tough. You can say we can do a search in Excel, we can do a search in Word document, that we can do, but that's not the ideal way of doing that, right? Now, if I want to take, if I want to take all the employees who are having a department ID, trust me, I cannot find a list of any of the document. In Excel, you can do a sorting based on the department ID, but again, you have to do certain things. So such kind of a storage becomes a table. Okay. Now, this Azure storage or Azure storage account is a durable, secure, scalable, and accessible. Storage for the virtual machines, unstructured data and structured data. 2 tiers, premium and storage standard. Now we have more. Okay, we have, in standard we have two, standard SSD and standard STD. Now new is there is in a premium, that's ultra. Sorry, new is in an ultra. I'm not sure when is launched, might be 2, 3, or 4 or 5 months ago. No, we have an ultra as well. Okay. Now, Azure Storage Services. So let me create an Azure Storage account. Okay. Azure Storage accounts. Now create an Azure Storage account. As usual, I need my resource group. I have my subscription and look at naming convention, read it here. The name must be unique across all existing storage account name in Azure. In Azure, not in my account. It must be 3 to 24 character long and can contain only lowercase letters and numbers. Look at, I say Bhudev SA means storage account is not valid. I say SA is not valid. If I say Bhudev SA, now this storage account get validated, okay, across the Azure storage accounts, and if it's available, it will give me a signal to go ahead. Typically, do we create all the naming conventions based on our naming convention, the organization naming convention. Now, reason I can create this storage in any region is a East US is there, so I will use it. Now, performance, standard and the premium. Standard and the premium. Now, this, if you take the standard, recommend for most scenarios, general purpose V2 account. This is recommended for scenarios that require low latency. means databases. But trust me, nowadays we are not using storage account for the database storage purpose. We used managed disk, that we will discuss. Okay. Now redundancy means it should have the locally redundant storage. Locally redundant storage means it will be within the same data center, okay, or within a same server rack only. Okay, so lowest cost option with basic production against server rack within a same data center. And drive failures recommended for non-critical scenarios. So if I do look at, this is my typical data center, and if I'm having this racks, okay, for my storage. Okay, now if my storage account, my storage do exist in this rack, okay, it will fail for this purpose only. Okay, this is my storage account. If this is fail, okay, if this is fail, this can locally redundant, so this will be supported by this particular rack. Okay, second one is John redundant. Okay, Geo I will come second. John redundant, intermediate option with protection against data center level failures recommended by high availability scenarios. Now if you look at, this is my AZ, okay, availability is John. If this fails, what will happen? Is my data will be available in case of the locally redundant? No, because if my data comes from this or this, will be only available if this availability zone availability is there. If entire availability zone is down, means all the resources in that particular zone is unreachable or down. So in this case, I have another AZ John redundant, and Azure ensures that whatever this particular file you store in the AZ, if you have used a John redundant, that file be internally replicated to the another paired availability zone, which we do not have a visibility, Okay. Third one is a geo redundant, intermediate option with failover capabilities in a secondary region recommended by backup scenarios. Now if I talk beyond the availability zone, now if you look at, this is my this is my DC, okay, this is my DC, this is my AZ1, okay, this is my AZ2, okay, and they are in now let's say US East, okay, East US, this are there. Now if I am having a locally redundant LRS, this will be applicable. If I have John redundant, this also will be applicable. Now geo redundant means I'm having my presence in US East 2. If my this East US completely goes down, my data which was available here as part of the geo redundant will be retrieved from this location. Okay, this is East US and this is East US 2. Got my point? So this becomes an geo redundant. Now next is Geo-Genre Storage. So optimal data protection solution that includes the offering of both GRS and ZRS recommended for critical data scenarios. Now, so we have looked at as locally redundant, John redundant, together is a geo redundant. Now, if we take both solutions, means John and Geo both together, means this is my very critical business. So trust me, if my business is important, so I always prefer my data should be available from the local region to avoid the latency, avoid the restore time, avoid the availability. Even I'm having for the best performance, but even for the best availability at the region level, I will use this option also to retrieve my data. Okay, so this becomes geo-genre redundant. Geo-genre redundant. Is that clear, guys? Any question by anyone? Now, advance. Now, configure security settings that impact your storage account. Require secure transfer for REST APIs operations is enabled, selected. Enable infrastructure encryption, enabled. If it is there, this option cannot be changed after this storage account is created. Only you can delete it. Enable below public access is enabled. Below public access. Enable storage account key access, enabled. Enable TLS version. Minimum 1.2 is enabled as per the latest TLS versions. Okay. But if there is an application dependency or requirement, we can go back to the version 1 or 1.1. Data lake storage. This is another kind of a
Okay,
storage.
what is TLS version? TLS.
TLS, transport layer security, right? So this comes in the security versions. So if by default we should use on the latest version, which is a version 1.2, but if there is an application dependency, okay, if there is an application dependency and which cannot use the minimum TLS, sorry, the current TLS version, or that require a specific TLS version, let's say 1.1, then you must use that specific TLS version. How to use it? Let me give you a very practical example. Okay, I will give you, I have something, or it's there. Okay, so here, so what it says, just you will understand if you execute this command to create a cluster. Okay, create a cluster, this error is reported. This error is reported. This error can be overcome if this is in a 2019. Otherwise, we can just remove this option. Number one. Number two is this. If you look at this particular option, if I want to have my witness, okay, if you look at TLS, right? Wrong, TLS 1.2. This is TLS 1.2 is nothing but a TLS 1.2. Okay, if this is TLS 1.2 means if you look at, this is typically my storage account. This is typically my storage account. This is my access key. Just I will show you in some time. Okay. Now, if I'm not enabling TLS 1.2 for my this cluster configuration, okay, you know the quorum disk, right? Wrong. We have always shared storage in our Oracle rack, right? Wrong. And in 10G, you might have heard is 9i is a quorum concept. Okay. Now, I cannot register my cluster. Okay. If I'm not changing either my TLS version of my at my OS level, or if I'm not changing my TLS version to make this equivalent to my OS. So my current OS version is 1.1. My storage account is 1.2. Okay, then I have to enable my TLS version on my OS, and trust me, it is successful. Okay, and this issue, I'm aware TLS version beforehand, but this issue I faced last week only when I was configuring Windows 2016 cluster. 2019 by default TLS 1.2 is there, so this error will never come. Okay, make sense, guys? Any question?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, now again below storage access tier. Now you want to have use an a hot or as in a cold. Hot means frequently accessed data, cool means infrequent access data, means kind of an archive or the backup purpose. So this account I'm going to use for my hot purpose, hot requirement. Now networking, this networking, if you remember in the slide we discussed something called as a public access, something is in a private access. It was there somewhere where we reached. I was discussing endpoints. Okay, this. So if you look at, if I want to make a public endpoint, means all those who are having the address for this storage account, they can connect. If you want to put on a restriction to public endpoint with selected network, now you need to tell the network here, whether Microsoft networking routing or internet. Now, if needs to be restricted, trust me, most of the time we do with the private endpoint. Okay, storage account. But if there is a there is my customer who does come from the public sites, then what I say, I only allow the public endpoint of my customer. That's it. Okay, and that is required again. Public endpoints is useful where you are having something called a publishing or something public readable data. Okay, based on your requirement you can select it. When you say the private endpoint means add in a private endpoint. Now this private endpoint, if you look at, is needed for the subscription, resource group, location, what name I say, BPS private endpoint. Sorry. Okay, now which type of storage in this? If you look at blob, files, tables, queues. Okay, now this is having a secondary option as well. Now which network? Certainly I will use my network. If I want to provide an access to any other network, I can use that network as well. In that network, which subnet? In that network, which subnet can access? If I say auto RGVNet, if you look at, I'm having 3 subnet. From which subnet? Trust me, if this is very secure, I will go through my firewall. I will go through my firewall because I want to take a log of firewall. I will say my application subnet, but this selected subnet gateway is restricted and it cannot be used with the private endpoints. So my Azure firewall comes here into the picture. Okay, I will say default. Okay, third one is an app subnet. This app subnet is typically for my dedicated for the load balancer, hence this cannot be used here. So I'm having a default, or I'm having an application, I'm having a database subnet, web subnet, or any subnet, I can use it. Now if I select this, now only from this private subnet, this current storage account which I'm going to provision can be accessed. Data protection. Now this is a retention policy. Now enable soft delete for blobs. Soft delete enables you to recover blob that were previously marked up for deletion, including blob that were overwritten. If I say delete something and soft delete is enabled, within this many days of the retention period, I can recover that particular data. Enable soft delete for containers. Similarly, enable soft delete for shares. Means if it is my blob, then I do not require these two options. If it is only my file share, then I require only this option. So you need to select your options. If it is a container, this option, and set the retention. I'm not enabling it, and this could be 0 to I believe 35 days for this account, okay, or 0 to 35 for managed disk. Okay, need to check. Now manage version and keep track changes made to your blob data. Enable versioning for the blobs. Enable blob change feed. Versioning means it may happen I'm continuously updating single file, and I want to monitor which file version, which particular file is having a which kind of a data or updated with what version, what date. Means based on the update. Because if I overwrite particular file, the previous contents after file has been saved is gone for forever. You cannot recover what was my contents in my file. But if you look at this option, if you enable, whenever you save the file is saved with the new version with the same name but new version. That file will have many versions. Now tag as usual. Now say review and create, and my storage account will get created. Okay, so this is an store account creation. Okay, now coming to the Azure Storage services. Now I have Azure containers, a massively scalable object store for text or binary data. Azure tables, ideal for storing structured and non-relational data. Azure cubes, a message store for reliable messaging between application component. Azure files, managed file share for cloud or non-cloud, means on-prem deployment. Okay, so container, table, queue, file, blobs, entities, message, directories. So depending on what kind of a data we have. Now this is a different storage account kinds. Now I have a storage account type, supported services, supported tiers and replication. Blob storage means blob and append blob. Okay, blob and append blob. This goes with the standard tiers. LRS, locally redundant storage, GRS, geo redundant storage, and RAGRS, read only GRS. It is not having a genre redundant. Storage purpose, general purpose V1, below file, queue, table, and disk. Disk is in a VHD disk. Okay, unmanaged disk, standard and premium account type, that support tier, LRS, GRS, and RAGRS. Now we have created in current storage V2 general purpose below file, table, and the queue. Now it is having a LRS, GRS, RAGRS, ZRS, Z, GZRS, and RAGRS. So wherever RA is there, okay, that becomes read access. Okay, blob storage, block blobs, and the append blobs. Okay, premiums, LRS and ZRS. And again, this feature is not available in all the regions, and mostly the regions in which this option is not available is recently created or provisioned regions. Okay, file storage, file only, premium, LRS, ZRS, and limited region. Call. Guys, uh, can we take a quick 10-15 minutes break and come back? I have some important work. Someone has come to my house.
Yes, yes.
Okay, just we'll meet after 15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, thank you.